Hello, Linton Herbert here. As you know, my interest, my life's work has to do with population and mating strategy and fertility and how they all impact human society. Uh, can hardly imagine anything that's more important, um, but in that, I guess I'm pretty much alone. So anything else like this is outside my field of interest, outside my field of expertise, but I just thought I'd tell you about them a little bit. Okay. Uh, Besides which, I'm going to try to rally some enthusiasm out of Richie from Boston, and this is one of his favorite topics, so I'll say what I have to say about it. Okay, if you see let's see, chemtrails and contrails, you'll see a commercial jetliner in the sky. You might see a little cloudy white trail behind it. That's what Richie from Boston and many other people take an interest in. Now then, a straight jet engine, and here's a sort of a model of a straight jet engine. It's long tube. In with down the center of the tube, there is an axle, um, and the tube is constant diameter in real life. Yeah, there's an axle down the center of the tube held in place by bearings. Air enters, let's say this is the front of the tube. It's compressed by blades attached to the axle, and then there are blades attached to the cylinder. They're the cylindrical tube, and the blades do like that and pump and enormously compress air in the first part of the tube. Um, the result is air that has been compressed and is very hot because of the compression. Um, and then it enters a combustion chamber farther down the tube where fuel is added, which explodes immediately as it's added. It burns, well, instantly as it's added. And then the hot burned gases come on down to a turbine in the back. They continue, and the turbine has its own blades. The turbine is kind of like a fan. Um, and the spinning of that turbine turns the whole axle. Um, there are enormous pressures and temperatures, so this machine is very expensive. Uh, the useful output is only a fraction of the exhaust, um, pushes on, as it were, a rather small amount of air, or in other words, this enormous amount of turbulence. It's very inefficient. So we have very heavy and expensive machine that uh, is not efficient, but it works at a very high temperature, and that high temperature means it does have high efficiency, um, and so it's got high efficiency. Let's be more efficient, let's say, than an old steam locomotive. Now, if you could design and build a old steam locomotive, um, that functions the same kind of pressure and temperature, um, the it would actually be more efficient than the jet engine. Um, but the drawbacks of the jet engine are balanced by the fact that the raw power, it turns out, is enormous. One improvement you could make is put a second tube around the first. Here's the tube. Well, yeah, I know it's a roll of duct tape. Okay, short tube, longer tube, and Um, Big fan inside this bigger in diameter, but rather short tube. It doesn't have to be very long, just a enough to accommodate one fan, and maybe a gear down the rate of turn of the axle. So air comes in. Most of the air goes around the jet engine, um, and so the power of the engine here is turning this fan that mostly bypasses the engine, and that results in greater efficiency. More area pushed on, if you want to look at it that way. There. Yep. Do not drop your jet engine at home. Less energy going to turbulence. Now, there's a car been recently marketed. Um, and it has no engine, but it's a very strong, light tank for compressed air. That air drives a little motor that pushes the car along. In an accident, the tank dumps its air and there's no gasoline sloshing around. Temperatures are low since a modern electric generator is more efficient than anything you'd try to drive. There's a significant, what am I saying? You don't have the cost of an electric motor. You don't have the cost of a generator. You just have this air tank, and the air tank uh, pushes air through, runs the little motor. Very relatively safe. It's relatively cheap to build, and of course not available in the United States, but someday maybe. If you extend that idea to an airliner, the tank can be added to an extended fuselage. Um, so if the fuselage is this long, you can make it this long and use the new space just to put in the compressed air. Um, uh, Instead of a jet engine, you just put big ducted fans. You remember our fan? Memento. Remember the fan. One at the end of each wingtip, and they'd be spun by the compressed air. You'd have to put them higher up off the ground so they didn't drag the ground. Things like that you'd have to think about, but you could do it. You could make an airplane that only used compressed air. You wouldn't have the wasteful wingtip vortices because the wingtips would be covered by the turbines. Whole thing's safer, cheaper, quieter, cooler, more efficient, long-lasting machine. But it will be stuck with jets for a while, I guess. One reason for that, if you pardon me getting a little political, uh, we we who are expendable, not the super overlords, but you and me, people at work. We drive around in gasoline-powered cars. So that leaves lots of kerosene left over because you pull the gasoline out of petroleum, and among the things you have left is kerosene. There's not much use for now that Grandma's old kerosene lantern isn't used significantly. So that kerosene is sold very cheaply, and they burn it in jets. So when you're driving your car, you're subsidizing jet travel by people for whom jet travel is routine. All right, 1883, a volcano called Krakatoa. Uh, Took a little time, took a few days, but and it happened in stages, but it blew up, and the loudest explosion of that eruption was the loudest noise in history. Heard 3,000 miles away and detected as a pressure wave that circled the Earth about 4 times. I mean, that's very loud. It resulted in an enormous amount of sulfuric acid in the upper atmosphere. Average temperatures in the northern hemisphere went down a couple of degrees for maybe a year. Um, then, alas, the experts got involved. And if you've been following my talks, you know that I have problems with experts in a number of ways. Um, they can be very, very wrong and make very stupid mistakes. They, the experts, figure, okay, um, well, they say the more greater the diversity of a population, the better. Period. No, diversity is killing all the babies. Not quite yet, but we're on the road in that direction. It's a question how much can be saved. They think the universe began with the Big Bang, so no, time is backwards, and the Big Bang moment describes the end. This time they're saying the sulfuric acid blocked out the sun, so the Earth cooled off in the shade. Oh, cool. No, the Earth was cut off from surrounding space. The atmosphere began to equilibrate thermally with the oceans and some ice that melted. I used to feel embarrassed for them. Every winter we'd be told if there's a nuclear war, a bunch of stuff will burn up and that will cause a nuclear winter. Every summer we burn so much stuff it's going to cause greenhouse gases like CO2 to trap the heat and give us global warming. I shouldn't have worried. None of the experts had a problem reversing this story depending on the season. Nobody ever lifted a finger and said, you people are getting opposite effects from the same cause. No, they just went about their way. Eventually, the Cold War wound down. There was no money and warning about nuclear winters any longer. So, which warning was right? Neither was right, I guess. Suppose you toss a black ball and a white ball in the oven at 200 degrees Fahrenheit and let the system equilibrate. Which ball will be hotter after it's equilibrated? Of course, they'll both be 200 degrees. If they weren't, you wouldn't need an oven or even a refrigerator. Just a couple of boxes with different colors. All right, we'll up the ante. We'll take a green ball and suspend it in a glass globe with CO2. It'll still be at 200 degrees. All those things and anything else you like that does not have a power source, put them in space at the same distance from the sun as the Earth, let them spin and distribute the sunlight, and they'll come out to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, good old comfy room temperature. You don't suppose that's why you're comfortable at that temperature, do you? Duh. Yeah, that's the local balance between sunlight and the cold of space. And so that's where natural selection has placed you. Find that temperature and be comfortable there. Does that mean there's absolutely no effect of CO2 on the surface temperature of the Earth? I can't swear to no effect. It has to be a secondary effect. You can call me a conspiracy theorist. Some of my favorite people are conspiracy theorists. You can call me a conspiracy expert. Just because you're an expert doesn't mean you're not wrong, right? So forget conspiracy theory. It's conspiracy expertise. So what about our nuclear volcanic winter. Understand that you have to understand something called the lapse rate. Imagine a vertical tube. Remember a tube? This is time it's a lot bigger. Um, uh, all the air in there is the same temperature. No heat coming in and out. Nothing should happen to the air. Now warm the bottom of the tube. Okay, so we have a vertical tube. It's 70 degrees or whatever. Sealed top and bottom. Complete insulation. No heat goes in or out. Just sits there indefinitely. Okay, you heat the bottom, the air expands so it weighs a little less per unit volume, starts to rise. As it rises, it expands and cools. Right? Same thing happens in the atmosphere. Heat comes from the sunlight hitting the surface, hot air rises until a gradient is established, colder air above warmer. The rate at which it gets colder is called the lapse rate, and it's pretty much constant. Okay, suppose there's a lot of sulfuric acid or soot or what have you at high altitude. Say it blocks 90% of the sunlight. Now, it is roughly the stuff up there that equilibrates to 70 degrees. That stuff. Your sulfur dioxide, your sulfuric acid up there. So now the same temperature is up there as the surface temperature is for us. It's called a temperature inversion. I mean, the temperature rises faster than the lapse rate calls for. The temperature does not drop as fast as the lapse rate says it should. Now, there's no air movement up or down, nothing sideways, no wind, no rain. Brief drop in temperature. But that 10% of the sunlight that gets through is still warming the surface. The air can't rise to dump the heat into space because of the high temperature up there because of the temperature inversion. It gets hotter, right? So, yeah, you melt some water and warm the seas, but eventually the temperature is going to go up where the sunlight is interacting with opaque material. At 30,000 feet, where the temperature is generally about 30 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, it rises to about 70 degrees above. There's a 100-degree difference in the surface temperature. It has gone up. That puts the surface temperatures, instead of 70 degrees, at 170 degrees. We could not survive that, right? It'll take a while, but our nuclear winter would eventually be a nuclear cooker. All right, the experts are dead wrong on both counts, even though it seems they had to be right on one of them. Okay, shift gears. A number of years ago, the military announced they were going to release some barium in the atmosphere and expect to see a pink smudge in the sky. I don't remember anybody saying it. Maybe there was cloud cover. No harm done. On the other hand, geoengineering experts have been saying we ought to put barium or sulfuric acid or whatever you say into the stratosphere to shade the Earth, give us shade to relieve global warming. As far as I know, no action has been taken on this, but either a collection of independent conspiracy experts, but enter a collection of independent conspiracy experts. They're all declaring it's already going on. That's what they're saying. And they're saying the resulting visible stuff being dumped up there, they call them chemtrails. Mixed reaction. First, I don't believe it. I've seen so many jets being fueled, and I've not seen anything other than, fuel being pumped into them. But I most heartily welcome their voices. They have made enough of a fuss so that the chance that we will have real chemtrails is remote. They might just be saving our lives. Thank your local conspiracy expert. Um, when I was talking about mental telepathy, free energy from the vacuum, and interdimensional travel, time travel, um, uh, except within a contained space, we could talk about that. Instantaneous travel over great distances, and so forth. My level of skepticism, never zero, goes through the roof. Even commentators that I respect declare that we are being poisoned by chemtrails. I think, okay, I give you that one. Cost of the lost plausibility is more than balanced by the potential cost of the harebrained scheme in the first place if they were ever to implement it. Okay, there's some good news. Recently, a study has shown that when volcanoes blanket the atmosphere, the loss of crop yield more than offsets any possible advantage of slowing down global warming. All right? So that particular geoengineering scheme is off the table. Sorry, but I've lost the reference on that, but it seemed to be most plausible on the face of it. The relevant conspiracy experts do something that I like. They offer evidence. Aha. One thing that they offer, the conspiracy experts who talk about chemtrails, is that the sun, and I think I remember the sun used to be yellow, it now looks white. I look up and it does seem to be white. Don't understand why, but I am convinced that somebody has looked up and they have seen what I see. That's good to know. It does make you think. Another thing, they are so-called chemtrails that last much longer than contrails. My own observation is that indeed contrails are lasting much longer than I remember. So what's contrail? Well, kerosene's burned in a jet, carbon dioxide is released, and along with water vapor, the CO2 is invisible, water vapor freezes. This leaves a trail of ice crystals. Ice does not need to melt before it evaporates. It's called sublimation when it does that. Goes directly from solid to gas. Seems to me, as to other conspiracy experts, that the sublimation is taking longer. That's why it's lasting. You don't have to invoke impurities in the ice crystals. You just have to account for the fact, or at least the observation from a lot of us, that those contrails are lasting. Well, after decades of contrail contribution to humidity at altitude, that humidity has risen, and for whatever reason, the contrails seem to be lingering, and that means it's more humid up there. Like evaporation, sublimation goes slower in a humid environment. Have I heard any of the non-conspiracy experts say as much? I've not heard that, but I'm sure it's true. So we're getting more and more opacification of the stratosphere, and the resulting increase in the temperature, small, thanks to the lapse rate, increasing surface temperature, right? So you're warming up your stratosphere from ice crystals. And so the temperature is rising from 70 below to something higher than that. And lapse rate is fixed. Compressibility of air hadn't changed. The surface is getting warmer at the same rate. So our super rich overlords are running around burning kerosene, loading up the stratosphere with ice crystals, giving us those long, enduring contrails, and they are raising the temperature up there closer to 70 degrees Fahrenheit and raising the temperature down here to where we're not boiling. But long before that would happen, crop yields down, world famine. Okay, well, how would you want to get rid of contrails? Stop burning stuff up there. Maybe uh, power those airplanes with something that does not release water, like maybe compressed air. So all the best. We get back to you again sometime.